The sky had gone the color of old brass, and the wind carried dust that tasted like iron. Jacob Mercer stood at the edge of his property line, one boot propped on the fence rail, watching the horizon like a man expecting bad weather. He wasn't. The sky was clear, but something in the air felt wrong, the kind of wrong that makes horses stamp and dogs whine at nothing. He'd been ranching this stretch of Montana territory for 11 years, long enough to know when the land was trying to tell him something. The fence post beneath his hand was warm from the afternoon sun. Beyond it, the trail wound east toward the railroad town, a pale scar cut through sagebrush and wild grass. Nobody used it much anymore, not since the new route opened up north. That's why he noticed the figure. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark smudge moving slow against the pale earth, too small to be a rider, too unsteady to be walking with purpose. Jacob squinted, his hand dropping instinctively to his side, though he wasn't wearing his gun. Hadn't worn it in 3 years, not since Mary told him she was tired of wondering if he'd come home with blood on his hands. The figure stumbled, fell, got back up. Jacob's jaw tightened. He vaulted the fence and started walking, his strides long and deliberate. The wind pushed against him, carrying the scent of dust and something else, something sharp and animal. Fear, maybe, or pain. As he got closer, the figure became a girl. No, a child. She couldn't have been more than 15, her dress torn and filthy, her hair hanging in dark tangles around her face. She was clutching her stomach with both hands, bent nearly double, and every few steps she stopped, swaying like she might collapse. Jacob broke into a run. "Hey," his voice carried across the empty land. "Hey, hold on." The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, wild, the whites showing all around. She tried to move faster, tried to run, but her legs gave out and she crumpled into the dirt. By the time Jacob reached her, she was gasping, her face pale as milk, her lips moving soundlessly. "Easy," he said, dropping to one knee beside her. "Easy now, I'm not." Then he saw it. Her dress was soaked through, dark with sweat and something else. Her hands were pressed against her belly, which was swollen tight beneath the fabric. She wasn't just sick. She was in labor. "Jesus," Jacob breathed. The girl's eyes rolled back, and her whole body went rigid. A low, animal sound tore from her throat, not quite a scream, not quite a moan. Her fingers clawed at the dirt. Jacob's mind raced. The ranch was a mile back. The town was 10 miles east. There was no time for either. "All right," he said, forcing his voice steady. "All right, listen to me. You're going to be fine. You hear me? You're going to be fine." The girl didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, her whole body trembling. Jacob pulled off his coat and spread it on the ground beside her. Then, as gently as he could, he eased her onto it. She didn't resist, didn't even seem to know he was there. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep her focused, trying to keep himself from panicking. "Can you tell me your name?" Her lips moved, a whisper barely audible. "Anna." "Anna," Jacob repeated. "All right, Anna, I'm Jacob. I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay with me. Can you do that?" Her eyes found his for a moment, brown and deep, and filled with a terror so raw it made his chest ache. Then another contraction hit, and she arched off the ground, her scream splitting the air. Jacob had helped birth calves, colts, even a foal once in the middle of a blizzard. But this was different. This was a child having a child, alone on an empty trail in the middle of nowhere, and he had no idea if he could do what needed doing. He positioned himself, his hands shaking despite himself. "Anna, listen to me," he said firmly. "When the next pain comes, I need you to push. You understand? You have to push." She nodded weakly, her face slick with sweat. The contraction came fast. Anna's whole body tensed, and Jacob saw the crown of the baby's head. His heart hammered in his chest. "That's it," he said, his voice rough. "That's it, Anna, keep going." She pushed, her scream tearing through the silence, and suddenly the baby was there, slipping into Jacob's hands in a rush of blood and fluid, tiny and impossibly fragile. For a moment, the world stopped. The baby didn't move, didn't cry. Jacob's breath caught. He turned the infant over, cleared its mouth with his finger, and rubbed its back the way he'd seen done with newborn calves. Once, twice. Nothing. Come on, he whispered. Come on, breathes. Then, like a miracle, the baby gasped. A thin, reedy wail rose into the hot afternoon air. Jacob nearly collapsed with relief. He wrapped the baby in his shirt, a girl, impossibly small, and turned back to Anna. She was staring at the sky, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. Anna, Jacob said sharply. Anna, stay with me. You've got a daughter. You hear me? You've got a little girl. Her gaze drifted toward him, unfocused. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Jacob laid the baby on her chest, then pressed his hands against the bleeding. Too much blood, far too much. Hold on, he said, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. Just hold on. Anna's hand moved, weak and trembling, to rest on the baby's back. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Then her eyes closed. No, Jacob said. No, don't you do that, don't you. But her chest was still rising and falling, barely, but enough. Jacob scooped them both up, Anna cradled in his arms, the baby pressed between them, and started running. Mary Mercer had seen a lot in her 34 years, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of her husband kicking open the front door with her unconscious girl in his arms and a blood-soaked newborn baby wailing against her chest. Sweet Jesus, she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. Get blankets, Jacob barked, his voice hoarse. Hot water, towels, everything. Mary didn't ask questions, she moved. Within minutes, Anna was laid out on the spare bed in the back room, the baby cleaned and wrapped in soft cotton, and Mary was working with the swift, methodical precision of a woman who'd nursed her share of the sick and dying. Jacob stood in the doorway, his shirt gone, his hands still stained red. He watched Mary press cloth after cloth against Anna's bleeding, watched her murmur soft words the girl couldn't hear, watched the color slowly, agonizingly slowly, return to Anna's face. She going to make it? He asked quietly. Mary didn't look up. I don't know. The baby started crying again, a thin, desperate sound. Mary glanced at Jacob. She needs to eat. There's goat's milk in the cold box. Warm it, not too hot. Use a clean rag, let her suck it. Jacob nodded and moved to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with his hands. By the time the sun set, Anna's breathing had steadied. The bleeding had slowed. Mary had done everything she could, and now it was up to the girl's body to decide if it wanted to keep fighting. Jacob sat at the kitchen table, the baby asleep in his arms, and stared at nothing. Mary came out of the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked exhausted. She wake up? Jacob asked. Not yet. Mary poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mary said, What happened out there? Jacob told her all of it. The girl on the trail, the labor, the desperate run back to the ranch. When he finished, Mary was quiet, her gaze distant. She's just a child, she said softly. I know. And this baby, Mary looked at the infant in Jacob's arms. She's not going to survive without milk, real milk. And Anna, if she wakes up, she's going to need time, weeks maybe. Jacob nodded slowly, so we take care of them. Mary's eyes lifted to his. Jacob, we don't know who she is, where she came from, why she was out there alone. Does it matter? It might, Mary's voice was gentle but firm, if someone's looking for her. Then they can come here and explain why a 15-year-old girl was dying on a trail in the middle of nowhere. Jacob's voice was harder than he intended. He softened it. Mary, I'm not turning her out, not until she's well, not until she can tell us what happened. Mary studied him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. All right, she said, we'll keep them for now. Anna woke 2 days later. Jacob was in the barn when Mary came to get him, her face unreadable. She's asking for the baby, Mary said. Jacob found Anna propped up in bed, pale and hollow-eyed but conscious. The baby was in her arms, and she was staring down at her with an expression Jacob couldn't name. Anna, he said gently, stepping into the room. She looked up, and for a moment, fear flashed across her face. Then she seemed to remember the trail, the birth, his hands catching her daughter. "You saved us," she whispered. Jacob shook his head. "You saved yourself, I just helped." Anna looked back down at the baby. I didn't think we'd make it." "Where were you going?" Mary asked quietly from the doorway. Anna's jaw tightened. "Away." "From what?" "Silence." Mary stepped closer. "Anna, if someone's looking for you, if you're in danger, we need to know." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "My father," she said finally, her voice flat. "He's the one who, the baby's father is." She swallowed hard. It was him. The room went cold. Jacob felt his stomach turn. Mary's hand went to her mouth. "I ran," Anna continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I started showing, I knew what he'd do. So I took what I could and I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I had to get away." Mary crossed the room. ND sat on the edge of the bed. She took Anna's hand. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "You and your daughter, you're safe." Anna's tears finally spilled over. "He'll come looking." "Let him," Jacob said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let him come." Mary shot him a warning look, but she didn't contradict him. That night, after Anna and the baby were asleep, Jacob stood on the porch and stared out at the dark horizon. Mary joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You meant what you said," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I did." "Jacob, if her father comes." "He won't take her." Jacob's voice was iron. "I don't care who he is, he won't take her." Mary was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We're going to have to be ready for whatever comes." Jacob nodded. In the distance, a coyote howled. The wind carried the sound away. The rider came on the 5th day. Jacob saw him from the field, a tall man on a black horse, moving slow and deliberate down the trail. He sat too straight in the saddle, like a man used to being obeyed. Jacob's gut twisted. He walked back to the house, his stride measured but quick. Mary was inside, mending a shirt. Anna was in the back room with the baby. "Someone's coming," Jacob said. Mary's hands stilled. "Him." "I don't know, but I'm not taking chances." He went to the cabinet above the hearth and pulled down the gun he hadn't touched in 3 years. He checked the cylinder. Loaded. Mary stood. "Jacob." "Go to the back room," he said quietly. "Stay with Anna. Don't come out until I say." She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes. But she didn't. She just nodded and disappeared down the hall. Jacob stepped onto the porch, the gun heavy in his hand, and waited. The rider came into the yard and stopped. He was older than Jacob had expected, maybe 50, with gray streaking his beard and lines carved deep around his mouth. He wore a preacher's coat, dust-stained and travel-worn, and his eyes were the pale blue of winter ice. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice was smooth, measured, the kind of voice that could convince you of anything. Jacob didn't return the greeting. "What do you want?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm looking for someone, a girl, about 15, dark hair. She ran away from home a few weeks back, and I've been tracking her ever since." He leaned forward slightly in the saddle. "You wouldn't happen to have seen her, would you?" Jacob's grip tightened on the gun, though he kept it at his side. "Lots of people use that trail. Can't say I've noticed." The man's smile didn't falter. "She's my daughter, Anna, and she's not well, not in her mind, you understand. She gets confused, tells stories." He shook his head, a picture of paternal concern. "I'm worried she might hurt herself or someone else." Jacob felt a cold rage settle in his chest. "That's so." "It is." The man's eyes drifted toward the house. "I've got reason to believe she came this way. If she's here, I'd be grateful if you'd return her to me. I'm her father. I have a right." "You've got no rights here," Jacob said flatly. The man's expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough. The warmth drained out of his eyes, leaving something hard and cruel. "I don't think you understand," he said softly. "That girl is my property, and so is whatever she's carrying. The law's on my side." "The law's 10 miles away," Jacob said, "and you're on my land." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then the man's hand moved toward his coat. Jacob's gun came up fast, the barrel leveled at the man's chest. "Don't," Jacob said quietly. The man froze. Then slowly he raised his hands, palms out. "Easy, friend. I'm just a father looking for his child." "You're a liar," Jacob said, "and if you come back here, you won't leave." The man's face darkened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's mine to make." For a heartbeat, Jacob thought the man might try something, might reach for a weapon, might spur his horse forward. But he didn't. He just smiled, cold and thin, and turned his horse around. "I'll be back," he said over his shoulder, "with the law, and you'll regret this." Jacob watched him ride away, his heart hammering, his hands steady on the gun. When the rider disappeared over the ridge, Mary came out onto the porch. "He'll come back," she said quietly. "I know. And he'll bring others." "I know." Mary looked at him, her face tight with worry. "Jacob, we can't fight the law." "We can fight him," Jacob said. He turned to her. "Anna's story, it's the truth, isn't it? You can see it in her eyes." "Yes," Mary whispered. "God help us, yes." Jacob nodded. "Then we don't give her back, no matter what." That night Jacob didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with his rifle, watching the trail, waiting for the dust cloud that would mean riders coming. Inside, Anna held her daughter and wept silently because she knew what was coming. And Mary prayed, though she wasn't sure God was listening. Ending. Dawn came quiet and cold. Jacob was still on the porch, his eyes gritty with exhaustion, when Mary brought him coffee. She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "He didn't come," she said. "Not yet." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Finally, Mary said, "Anna told me something last night." Jacob looked at her. "She said she prayed for death on that trail, said she asked God to just let her die so she wouldn't have to be afraid anymore." Mary's voice was soft, careful. "And then you found her. She thinks that means something." "What do you think it means?" Mary was quiet for a moment. "I think it means we're supposed to keep her alive, no matter what it costs." Jacob took her hand. "You know what we're risking." "I know. If he comes back with the law, if they take her, we could lose everything. The ranch, our life here, everything." Mary's fingers tightened around his. "And if we let him take her, we lose something worse." Jacob nodded slowly. Inside, the baby started crying, a thin, persistent wail. Mary stood. "I'll get her." "Mary." She turned. "Thank you," Jacob said quietly, "for standing with me on this." Mary's eyes softened. "Where else would I be?" Later that morning, Anna came out of the back room for the first time since waking. She was still pale, still weak, but she could walk. The baby was in her arms, wrapped in one of Mary's quilts. Jacob was at the table, cleaning his rifle. He looked up when she entered. "You should be resting," he said. Anna shook her head. "I need to tell you something." Jacob set the rifle down. Mary came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Anna took a breath. "My father, his name is Thomas Garrick. He's a preacher in a town called Redemption, about 40 miles south of here. Everyone there thinks he's a good man, a godly man." Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. "He started coming to my room when I was 12, told me it was my duty, told me if I said anything, no one would believe me." Mary made a soft, hurt sound. "When I realized I was pregnant," Anna continued, "I knew I had to leave. I took some money he kept hidden in his study and I ran. I didn't have a plan, I couldn't stay." She looked down at her daughter. I didn't even know if I wanted her. I thought maybe I'd hate her. But then you caught her and I saw her face and her voice broke. I can't let him have her. I won't. Jacob stood and crossed the room. He knelt in front of Anna, meeting her eyes. He's not going to touch her, he said firmly. Or you, I promise you that. Anna's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what he's like. He's convincing. People believe him. The law will believe him. Then we'll make sure they don't. How? Jacob glanced at Mary. We tell the truth, your truth, and we don't back down. Anna shook her head. It won't be enough. It's never enough. Mary sat down beside her. Anna, listen to me. You're not alone anymore. You have us, and we're not going to let you face this by yourself. Anna looked between them, this couple who barely knew her, who'd taken her in and risked everything without asking for anything in return. And something in her chest that had been clenched tight for years finally loosened. She started to cry, not silent tears this time, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Mary pulled her close, cradling both Anna and the baby, and let her weep. Jacob stood and walked to the window. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty under the morning sun. Somewhere out there, Thomas Garrick was coming, with men, with the law, with all the power a man like him could muster. But here, in this house, was something more powerful. A girl who'd survived, a baby who'd been born into open hands, and two people who'd decided that doing the right thing mattered more than safety. Jacob picked up his rifle and checked it again. If Garrick wanted a fight, he'd get one. They came 3 days later, just after noon. 4 riders led by Thomas Garrick. One wore a marshal's star. The others looked like hired men, hard-eyed and armed. Jacob was ready. He met them in the yard, rifle in hand. Mary beside him with a shotgun she'd learned to shoot 20 years ago and hadn't forgotten how to use. The marshal was a heavy man with a tired face. He reined his horse to a stop and looked at Jacob with the weary expression of someone who'd been dragged into something he didn't want to deal with. You Jacob Mercer? He asked. I am. Marshal Ned Coleman. I'm here about a missing girl, Anna Garrick. He nodded toward Thomas. Her father says you're harboring her against her will. She's not here against her will, Jacob said evenly. She came here half dead on the trail. We took her in, that's all. Thomas leaned forward in his saddle, his face a mask of concern. Marshal, my daughter is unwell. She has episodes. She needs to come home where she can be cared for properly. Liar. Everyone turned. Anna stood in the doorway of the house, the baby in her arms. She was still pale, still unsteady, but her voice was clear. He's lying, she said, walking forward. He's not here to help me. He's here to take me back so I can't tell anyone what he did. Thomas's face went hard. Anna, you're confused. I'm not confused, Anna said, her voice rising. You raped me for 3 years, and when I got pregnant, I ran because I knew you'd kill me to keep your secret. The marshal's face changed. He looked at Thomas, then back at Anna. That's a serious accusation, he said carefully. It's the truth, Anna said. And this baby, she lifted her daughter slightly, she's his, not some boy from town, his. Thomas's mask slipped. For just a moment, something ugly and dangerous flashed across his face. You little. Enough, the marshal's voice cracked like a whip. He looked at Thomas. Reverend, I suggest you keep your mouth shut. Marshal, you can't possibly believe. I said shut up. Coleman turned back to Anna. Girl, do you swear what you're saying is true? I do, Anna said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. I swear it on my daughter's life. The marshal was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Jacob. You willing to shelter her, keep her safe while this gets sorted? I am, Jacob said. Coleman nodded slowly. He turned his horse around and looked at Thomas. Reverend, you're coming back to town with me. We're going to have a conversation, a long one. Thomas's face went white. You have no authority. I've got plenty, Coleman said coldly. And if half of what this girl says is true, you're going to hang. One of the hired men shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Jacob's rifle came up. "Don't," Jacob said quietly. The man froze. Coleman shot him a warning look. "Stand down, all of you." For a tense moment, nobody moved. Then Thomas laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You think this is over? You think anyone's going to believe her, a whore who ran away and—" Jacob moved before he thought. 3 strides, and he was beside Thomas's horse, yanking the man out of the saddle and slamming him into the dirt. Thomas hit the ground hard, gasping. Jacob stood over him, his fists clenched. "Say another word," Jacob said softly, "and I'll kill you myself." "Jacob," Mary's voice calm and firm, "that's enough." Jacob stepped back, his chest heaving. Coleman dismounted and hauled Thomas to his feet. "You're done talking, Reverend. Get on your horse." Thomas climbed back into the saddle, his face bruised and bleeding. He looked at Anna one last time, a look full of venom and rage. Anna didn't flinch. She just held her daughter closer and stared back. Coleman tipped his hat to Jacob. "I'll be in touch. Might need you to testify." "Anytime," Jacob said. The riders turned and left, Thomas's hands bound now, his head low. When they were gone, Anna sank to her knees in the dirt, the baby still clutched to her chest, and wept. Mary knelt beside her, wrapping both of them in her arms. Jacob stood watching the dust settle on the trail, the rifle heavy in his hands. It wasn't over. There would be a trial, questions, probably more trouble, but for now, it was enough. 6 months later, Anna stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching her daughter, Emma, she'd named her, sleep in a cradle Jacob had built from cottonwood. Thomas Garrick had hanged 3 weeks after his arrest, after 2 other girls from Redemption came forward with the same story Anna had told. The trial had been short, the verdict unanimous. Anna had watched him die. She'd thought it would make her feel something, relief maybe, or closure, but she just felt empty. Until she came back to the ranch, and Mary had pulled her into a hug, and Emma had smiled for the first time, and Anna realized that the emptiness wasn't loss. It was space for something new to grow. Jacob and Mary had offered to let her stay as long as she wanted, maybe forever if she liked. There was plenty of work on a ranch, Mary said, and Emma would grow up strong out here under the big sky. Anna had said yes. Now, as the sun dipped low and painted the land gold, she looked out at the horizon and thought about the girl on the trail, half dead, terrified, alone. She thought about the hands that had caught her daughter as she fell. And she thought about the life that was waiting for them now, hard maybe, but good, clean, free. Inside, Mary called her name. Supper was ready. Anna picked up Emma, kissed her forehead, and went inside. Behind her, the wind swept across the empty trail, carrying the dust away.